So I decided to start reviewing games for some reason. Um, but I'm not going to review new games. I'm going to review stuff that's on my backlog. So here it is. Horror is usually defined as a very strong feeling of fear, dread, and shock. So to call Dead Space 2 a horror game is a bit mislabeling it, I think. At no point do I feel fear and dread. I feel like having the benefit of not buying into the hype of the series as it happened, calling it horror is a bit disingenuous as to what it's actually trying to be, which I think is actually an action thriller. To me, horror games are mostly about trying to conserve your basically everything. Ammo is precious. Health is precious. Getting into a fight with more than one enemy at a time is usually pretty tough. Lighting conditions are pretty poor, so that under most conditions you can't really see what the monsters look like or even what they are. Horror and action games have very different set pieces that make them exciting, and they're exciting for different reasons. Dead Space as a series is obviously influenced by three major things. Aliens, and specifically Aliens and not Alien. We'll get into that whole debacle later. John Carpenter's The Thing, and the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Considering that the two of these are not really horror, but are horror-inspired, and the third thing is obviously pulling the least amount of weight as far as inspiration is concerned, the fact that I don't think that Dead Space as a series is a horror shouldn't really come as a surprise. I played Dead Space 1 earlier this year, and I found it to be a pretty little gem that I ignored for way too long, oddly enough. I was concerned that as someone who doesn't really enjoy horror in general, because I'm a whiny piss baby who doesn't like being scared, it would be too scary for my whiny piss baby sensibilities. Imagine my surprise that I found this game that everyone said was terrifying not actually scary at all. You simply had too many guns and too much ammo to ever really feel threatened. The game gleefully throws monsters at you in lighting conditions that allowed you to get a good look at their grotesque features. There were too many to mow down with lots of guns and lots of ammos to ever feel scared. I was too busy killing Dead Space's not zombies to go, oh wait, shit, I'm supposed to be scared right now. Whoa! Fuck! The second game starts the series' descent into pure action, and I hear that the third game turned into. Not only does Isaac gain a voice like this to occasionally make the admittingly rare snarky comment, oh yeah, good times, but there's tons of actiony bits that weren't really in the first one. Like this bit on the train, and it crashes, and you hang upside down, and waves of easily killable trash monsters lurch towards you, followed by having to deal with the first brute of the game, which I think I kind of cheesed because I brought a spear launcher with me. The sequence is cool as hell, but at odds with what I would consider to be a horror game. To me, horror discourages you from fighting monsters, because even 3 enemies at once is a hassle. In Dead Space, 3 enemies is basically the first encounter of the game. I don't mind this change. Dead Space 1 seemed to struggle with trying to find its identity. It thought it was being a horror game, so it had horror-like set pieces. It didn't know it was an action thriller. Dead Space 2 not only seems to know this, but embraces it, and throwing more enemies at you, having cooler set pieces, like this bit where you have to run away from the big scary necromorph as it chases you, and all in all being more comfortable with itself. It's not trying to be something that it clearly isn't. having not played the third one yet, I don't see why people didn't see the game becoming more of action-based after this. It's not really surprising in hindsight, but, whatever. It's not entirely different what happened with Aliens, actually. I would consider the first Alien a horror film, because it definitely had, that atmosphere, and it was only one monster terrorizing the entire cast. The creature was mostly kept hidden in shadows until the very end because it looked ridiculous. Have you seen it? Give me a hug! It took a lot to kill the fucker. However, if anyone were to call Aliens a horror movie, I would look at them like they had a second head. The monsters are just everywhere. They die really easily to the point where the threat in the first one is actually a bit laughable in retrospect. It had very actiony set pieces, especially the bit at the end with the alien queen and the walker thing. Aliens is entirely different tone than Alien, but that's not bad per se, especially since when they tried to recreate the tone of the first Alien in Alien 3, it turned out another movie like Alien was boring as hell. Dead Space's creators as a whole really, really like Aliens, a lot. So far, there have been 2 games that I've played sit on remote space stations that get overrun with creatures let loose on purpose by a government who doesn't really know how to control them in an effort to do something with them. Look, I'm going to be honest here. It's been 2 whole games, and I'm still not entirely sure what Unitology's deal is, aside from some convergence thing. Anyway, the point is, they can't control them, things go horribly wrong, and it's up to the hero to stop it. The only real difference is that while Wayland Yuntai wants to profit off the xenomorphs in a poorly unexplained way, Unitology wants to do weird religious culty things with the necromorphs in a poorly explained way. And now that I've been talking for over 5 minutes about the game without saying really anything about the game, I guess I should actually review this thing. Yeah, gameplay. I was a big fan of the departure from the fact that the zombies didn't die when you shot them in the head. In fact, I actually like the mechanic that some enemies actually get more aggressive when you shoot their head off, and it's actually very heavily discouraged to do headshots because of that. And so in order, the best way to kill them effectively is limb shots. I like going after the legs first because their arms will go around slower when they're crawling on the floor because they're missing a leg or 2. The first game had a lot of samey enemies. I didn't think that they really differentiated how they got towards you. Some just moved at you faster, some just hit harder, but the variety in Dead Space 2, I think, is really good. They're still mostly close-range fighters, which you think would not be a problem considering you have guns, but the way they come towards you is different. A lot of the enemies from the first game are back, the basic slasher type. There's the leaping guy. So there's still a little bit of that problem where some enemies just don't feel that different. But then you get the new guys. There's one enemy whose entire thing is being this mid-range fighter where he runs up, he barfs at you to slow you down, and then while you're being really slow, he comes up and he starts clawing at you. That's pretty cool. And then there's one enemy type that I thought was both annoying and really cool at the same time. Was these raptor dudes, and what they would do is they would hide around corners, and if you didn't shoot at them, they would start running towards you, and if they got to you, they would knock you down, deal a little bit of damage, and before you got back up, they would run away. So the necromorphs actually have guerrilla tactics, and that's great. I love that. It was a great way of changing things up. They didn't abuse it, but they certainly didn't underplay it. That's great. Oh yeah. From what I can gather, 7 years after the fact, Dead Space's one advertising had a lot be doing with like the edgiest game you've ever played, and there was a big focus on the fact that you could like kill babies. I'm sure this influenced some shitheel's decision to get the game for the better, but honestly, the enemy type didn't really feel like a baby since it was running around on all fours as opposed to crawling slowly. It felt more like if I was fighting a necromorph cat or dog or something. This game introduces two more extreme enemy types, and one actually looks and acts like a baby. It slowly crawls towards you, and it has like that yellow pus stuff that explodes when you shoot it or when it's like agitated. So the enemy would crawl towards you and then try and explode in a pile of pus and sick, and it was really gross. And a toddler type that is actually so easy to kill that you can just kill them by spamming Isaac's hissy fit button. That's what I like to call it, because oh my god, that attack is useless otherwise. I don't mind these additions. They do add a bit of variety when they show up, and they force you to change your strategy a little bit, but I don't think making them children was necessary. In fact, I think it's kind of pointless. I think it's shock values for shock value's sake, and it comes off as really contrived and forced. Like, whoa, you thought the first game was edgy? Wait until you kill 200 babies in this game! They look far too human to really jive with the rest of the game, I think. I think a better way to handle it was, or at least the toddler enemies, would have just had them, like, human adult bits split in half, and, like, their hands become feet, and their feet stay feet, or whatever. And then they would just run towards you. It would require two models, but I think it would be cooler and grosser and fit more with the whole body horror thing that was inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing. New weapons. They're pretty cool, but I played Dead Space 2 pretty much exactly how I played the first one, which was just concentrating on the plasma cutter and the ripper. I played with some of the new ones, but none of them really stuck with me except for the spear launcher, and even the spear launcher kind of lost its interest when it became readily apparent that I'm really bad at using it. Like, holy shit. The plasma cutter is so fucking overpowered that you can basically clear the whole game using it anyway, so why would you even bother? The first game had a big problem with backtracking, and every chapter would have you go back to a train station, and sometimes entire back halves of chapters had the objective, like, get to the train and leave! Not only that, but the first game also reused a couple areas, making me think they made a game when, oh shit, is 3 hours too short, and then haphazardly added a few chapters to pad the game out, because God forbid you spend $60 on a game, it's not 12 hours long. The second game doesn't really have this problem as much, or even really at all. Progress is constantly forward, and you go through an area that you've already gone through, like, maybe one time. As a result, the game's a little more linear and less, like, kind of linear, but you still wander around like in BioShock sort of deal. I don't mind this change. Linearity is not bad if you can make it at least look interesting, and Dead Space 2 succeeds in that. Dead Space 2 doesn't really waste your time with huge pointless side paths that aren't necessary to explore. At most, it's a small hallway with some goodies in it, and then you follow your little lighter pointer back to the door you're supposed to go through. Story exists. I mean, let's face it, Dead Space never had writing that was considered subtle or deep or thought-provoking. Like, you know at some point someone's going to betray you, because that's what they do in action thrillers. Like, there's the woman who betrays you with, like, a third of the way through the game or something like that, and then she dies almost immediately after the betrayal. Then they also gave Isaac a voice to interact with his dead girlfriend Hallucination, but you clearly know it's going to betray you. There's no way it's not a hostile mental takeover designed to try and fuck with you. That being said, the fact that there actually is a story this time is an improvement over the original Dead Space. whose entire story was basically shoved aside for 10 hours of gameplay and then thrown all at you at once in the last 3 chapters of the game. That was a little jarring. The one space I think Dead Space 2 really, really falls flat, though, are the boss fights. Dead Space 1 had some really cool boss fights, even if one of them was just basically a giant space butthole doing goatsy at you. Dead Space 2, I don't know, despite knowing that it's more of an action game now, it seemed to struggle with even giving you boss fights at all, let alone interesting ones. The Elite Brute was in the first game, like, that was a tense fight because you're stuck in such a small room and there's like no maneuverability because there's shit everywhere. And it was a really cool design because you've been fighting brutes that whole time, but this is like the toughest one in the game and they like take away a lot of the things that they usually give you in brute fights. The final boss was also a really great spectacle and really memorable, and I kind of wish I had footage of it, but I don't because I wasn't planning on ever doing reviews like this ever. This is kind of new for me. The final boss in Dead Space 2 is, spoilers, a shitty damage race that you win if you bring about 2 or 3 medium health packs with you. There you go. Yawn. So, is Dead Space 2 worth it? I would definitely say so. I don't regret the 9-10 hours I put into it. It was a marked improvement over the first game. It certainly had a better idea how to handle itself. It didn't really pad itself out too badly. There's better variety, an actual narrative. There really are way, way worse ways to waste your time.